the 9,630th meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is non-proliferation. The agenda is adopted. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representatives of Belarus, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Nicaragua, and the Syrian Arab Republic to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. Members of the Council have before them document S/2024/383, the text of a draft resolution submitted by Belarus, China, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Nicaragua, the Russian Federation, and the Syrian Arab Republic. The Council is ready to proceed to the vote on the draft resolution before it. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements before the vote. And I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, we all remember on the 24th of April, in this chamber, the United States, Japan, and their allies were unable to explain ultimately what the added value was behind their draft resolution on the placement of weapons of mass destruction in outer space, reaffirming the obligations which arise ultimately for all signatories to the 1967 Outer Space Treaty. They were unable to argument in a reasonable way their refusal to introduce in the draft a proposal we had on preventing an arms race in outer space, which made the document, which added some sense of purpose to this document. The vote showed that the Western Initiative had a single motivation to attempt to portray the Russian Federation in unfavorable light and to in an unsubstantiated way to assign to us a certain plan of action which we do not have. This is a situation that that dealt a major blow to international efforts geared towards keeping outer space peaceful. However, insofar as preventing an arms race in outer space and keeping space peacefully for peaceful purposes is a paramount priority for us, we decided to provide our Western colleagues with another opportunity, not in word, but in deed, to demonstrate the peaceful nature of their intentions. For that purpose, we drafted an alternative draft Security Council resolution. This, unlike the blatantly politicized American-Japanese resolution, will help to guarantee the exclusively peaceful exploration and use of outer space. We are confident that the peaceful use of outer space, which became a symbol of grandiose achievements in science and technology, is intended to serve as an effective means for resolving many global problems, including issues related to economic development. To this, the international community has been striving for more than half a century now. We also are persuaded of the need to prevent the transformation of outer space into yet another arena for confrontation and warfare. Now, more than ever before, it is necessary for space to completely be precluded from the arms race, for it to be preserved for peaceful purposes, and for these to become universally recognized international premises. The draft resolution we submitted is comprehensive in nature. It contains well-known provisions which reflect the interests and aspirations of the overwhelming majority of the members of the United Nations. Thanks to its broad scope, it is geared towards reaffirmation of state obligations not to use outer space for the placement of any forms of weapons, including weapons of mass destruction. Incidentally, this is specifically the language which the U.S. colleagues, with trumped-up pretext, demonstrably refused to incorporate into their draft resolution at the Security Council from the very beginning. Having conducted work on the document, we responsibly approached taking into account the concerns of all members. And I would further note that we made accommodations to Western colleagues, even lifting a principled important reference in the text of the Russian-Chinese draft treaty on the non-placement of weapons in outer space. Incidentally, this document remains on the negotiating table as part of the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva. At the same time, the above-mentioned draft treaty retains relevant and necessary, and it is regarded as the basis for future negotiations on the multilateral, legally binding instrument to prevent an arms race in outer space. Distinguished colleagues, the draft resolution is exceptionally significant in the context of those challenges which we are encountering in outer space. The adoption of this draft resolution will help to reaffirm our collective duty to keep peaceful space, to keep outer space peaceful, and to make a meaningful contribution to the reinforcement of international peace and security. Today's vote is a unique moment of truth for our Western colleagues. If they fail to support this, then they will clearly show that their main priority remains keeping a freedom of leeway for themselves to expedite the militarization of outer space. This would be particularly blatant in light of the fact that all of the provisions introduced by the U.S. and Japan on non-placement of WMDs in outer space, including nuclear weapons, have been preserved in our draft without any changes whatsoever. We urge all conscientious participants in outer space activity to support this initiative. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their important statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we are here today because Russia seeks to distract global attention from its development of a new satellite carrying a nuclear device. On April 24, Russia vetoed a resolution supported by 13 members of the Security Council that called on all member states not to develop nuclear weapons specifically designed to be placed in orbit. That resolution, which was a product of nearly 2 months of constructive negotiations and co-sponsored by 65 countries, reflected a simple reality. Placement of a nuclear weapon into orbit would not only violate the Outer Space Treaty, it would also threaten human spaceflight, as well as the vital communications, scientific, meteorological, agricultural, commercial, and national security services that any and all satellites provide to people around the globe. We have heard President Putin say publicly that Russia has no intention of deploying nuclear weapons in space. If that were the case, Russia would not have vetoed that resolution. Over the past several weeks, and following widespread condemnation from a geographically diverse group of member states in the General Assembly on May 6, Russia has sought to distract from its dangerous efforts to put a nuclear weapon into orbit. The culmination of Russia's campaign of diplomatic gaslighting and dissembling is the text before us today. Drafted through a hasty process that did not take into account legitimate, repeated, and shared concerns by a majority of this Council, Russia's resolution does not achieve the simple task that we set out to achieve several months ago: reaffirm the basic obligations of the Outer Space Treaty and avoid a nuclear arms race in space. Consequently, the United States will not support this disingenuous resolution. We urge the Council to reject it and instead reiterate our call for Russia to join every other member of this Council in supporting the common sense, straightforward text that dozens of member states supported only 4 weeks ago. Again, Russia does not want the Security Council to focus on its dangerous actions in space. Its veto then requires that we be skeptical of its statements today and its intentions in putting forward this resolution. It's also vital we not lose track of some simple facts. First, rather than enhance arms control, the Russian text put forward today would narrow the scope of efforts in other United Nations bodies in a way that would be detrimental to preventing an arms race in outer space. Second, by seeking to use this resolution to put forward language on other topics that Russia knows does not have consensus support in this Council, Russia's text also distracts from affirming the important obligations of all 116 states parties to the Outer Space Treaty, including that no nuclear weapons or other weapons of mass destruction be put into orbit. Third, the text that Russia vetoed on April 24 went to great lengths to address every Council member's concerns in a broader and more inclusive manner than what Russia has forced on the Council today. To repeat, the resolution that Russia vetoed was supported by 13 members of this Council and was co-sponsored by 65 member states. It reflected the strong global consensus, as the President of the General Assembly, Ambassador Francis, later declared during the Assembly's May 6 meeting that, and I quote, "Outer space does not belong to individual nations. Its peaceful and sustainable use is not subject to national appropriation and must be a place of peace and cooperation for the benefit and in the interest of all countries," unquote. The United States could not agree more. For our part, the United States will continue to demonstrate how space activities can be conducted in a responsible, peaceful, and sustainable manner in order to preserve the benefits of space for current and future generations. We also will continue to put a bright spotlight on Russia's troubling actions in space and how they diverge from its statements here in the Security Council. Indeed, just last week, on May 16, Russia launched the satellite into low Earth orbit that the United States assesses is likely a counter-space weapon presumably capable of attacking other satellites in low Earth orbit. Russia deployed this new counter-space weapon into the same orbit as a U.S. government satellite. Russia's May 16 launch follows prior Russian satellite launches, likely of counter-space systems, to low Earth orbit in 2019 and 2022. Colleagues, I urge you to vote no on this distraction and to join us in pressing Russia to cease its obstruction here in the Security Council. And we urge you to join us in making clear to Russia that the world will not turn a blind eye to its dangerous and unprecedented efforts to develop a new satellite carrying a nuclear device, which undermines its obligations under the Outer Space Treaty and counters the views of an overwhelming majority of members of the Security Council. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for their important statement. The representative of the Russian Federation has asked for the floor to make a further statement.
Mr. President, listening to the horrific, the zealous statement of the U.S. representative, we had a difficulty understanding which resolution he was talking about. Did he read the resolution that has been placed on the table? The United States, not for the first time, has been accusing the Russian Federation of striving to place nuclear weapons in outer space. Just now, the U.S. representative referred to some kind of a satellite, which, in his opinion, once again, in a highly likely style, can be possibly placed on a nuclear engine. I didn't even fully understand what he was talking about, but that's not what is important. If the United States is accusing the Russian Federation of striving to place nuclear weapons in outer space, then what does the U.S. representative not like in the text of the resolution which proposed? The text contains identical wording, the same as the U.S. draft resolution, which was vetoed by us on the 24th April, and for good reason, because that draft resolution which you submitted, the U.S. delegation submitted, limited the scope of the resolution merely to weapons of mass destruction. We are now proposing a resolution which encompasses both WMDs and all forms of other weapons in outer space. We are talking about preventing an arms race in outer space. Let the U.S. representative, if he can, try to explain to us where he sees defects in our resolution insofar as it almost virtually is identical to the text of the resolution proposed by the U.S. and supplements it with all other forms of weapons which we believe must not be placed in outer space. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their statement. The representative of the United States has asked for the floor to make a further statement. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize for taking the floor, but I obviously need to respond to the remarks made by the Russian representative. In answer to his question, yes, I read your bad text. Your text includes a lengthy binding mechanism that cannot be verified. That is clear. We have had those discussions in Geneva before with regard to the type of treaty that you would like to see come into place. So we've seen this movie before. What I would submit to my Russian colleague is that we let the Council decide on his text, and we're about to do that. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States for their statement. I shall put the draft resolution to the vote now. Will those in favor of the draft resolution contained in document S/2024/383 please raise their hand? Those against? Those abstaining? The result of the voting is as follows: 7 votes in favor, 7 votes against, 1 abstention. The draft resolution has not been adopted, having failed to obtain the required number of votes. I now give the floor to those members of the Council who wish to make statements after the vote. The first on the list is the representative of Algeria. You have.
Mr. President, Algeria voted in favor of the draft resolution as it aligns with our long-standing position on the peaceful use of outer space and the prevention from its weaponization. As outlined in our constant position, Algeria firmly believes that outer space is the common heritage of humankind. It must be explored and utilized for the benefit of all nations, irrespective of their level of economic or scientific development. The draft resolution rightly calls upon all states, particularly those with major space capabilities, to actively contribute to the objective of peaceful use and prevent an arms race in outer space. We reiterate the importance of all states to refrain from actions that contradict this objective and existing treaties in the interest of maintaining international peace and security. The text commendably made reference to key documents such as the Outer Space Treaty, the NPT, and the Space 2030 Agenda, underlining the importance of international law and the crucial role of the Conference on Disarmament in negotiating multilateral agreements. Its emphasis on strict compliance with the Outer Space Treaty and other relevant legal instruments is crucial. Upholding and promoting universal adherence to these treaties is essential for preserving outer space for peaceful purposes. The draft resolution rightly underscores the urgent need for further measures, including legal binding instruments, to prevent an arms race in outer space. We have consistently championed the importance of negotiating such instruments. To conclude, Algeria reiterates its unwavering commitment to the prevention of an arms race in outer space and the preservation of outer space for peaceful purposes. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Republic of Korea voted against the resolution for two reasons. First, the Russian draft contained the language which did not reach consensus among Security Council members. Among this was one operative paragraph, OP8, which was identical to the Russian amendment not adopted at the previous meeting on April 24th. Given the dual-use nature of many space systems, it is very difficult to define a weapon in space, and so is the verification on compliance, even if we have a legally binding agreement. Ambiguity may lead to legal divergence and open the door to the intentional evasion of legal obligations. That is why many states, including the Republic of Korea, believe that we need to further develop rules, norms, and principles in order to address and tackle the present and the potential threats in the space domain in a relevant manner. The Russian text did not properly reflect these views. Second, the draft was put to vote without sufficient consultations. Despite several Council members' requests to have the resolution be balanced, the Russian Federation barely changed the text and put it in blue text as soon as the non-objection procedure was broken. Apparently, Russia was not intent on conducting the negotiations in good faith. This is all the more regrettable because Russia vetoed a draft resolution on the same topic, which enjoyed 13 votes of support, including E10 within the Council. Taking this opportunity, the Republic of Korea would like to emphasize that the Security Council needs to be more proactive in addressing emerging security challenges, especially in the space and the cyber domains. Throughout its term in the Security Council, the Republic of Korea stands ready to work with other Council members to make the Security Council more agile and relevant in maintaining international peace and security in our rapidly changing world. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the Republic of Korea for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Malta.
Thank you, President. Malta voted against this resolution, which failed to include the views of many Council members. We have done so on substance and, even more so, on procedural grounds. With regards to the text, while largely based on the resolution presented by Japan and the US, this draft removed key elements, including the reference to the applicability of international law in outer space. Such reference was supported by many Council members, and we regret its deletion. Furthermore, this draft contained 2 additional non-consensual OPs, which sought to divide the Council rather than achieving consensus. In fact, the same language contained in one of the 2 OPs was recently voted down in this very room when it was presented as an amendment to the resolution by Japan and the United States. On the other hand, we are disappointed by the approach adopted by the penholder. It is regrettable to see that a permanent member first vetoed a resolution on this topic, stressing that the Council should not discuss outer space and should not reaffirm existing obligations, only to then present its own draft on the same topic. Moreover, after only 1 round of consultations, it placed under silence a text that failed to address almost all of the concerns expressed by other members. This is not striving for consensus. This is not how we advance the interests of the wider UN membership. Initiatives like this only contribute to discrediting this body. As we have said before, we had a timely opportunity to adopt the first Security Council resolution on outer space and reaffirm the principles of the Outer Space Treaty. We missed this when the resolution was vetoed last month. Our collective goal is to ensure that outer space remains a peaceful domain for the benefit of all humankind. As space capabilities continue to increase, we believe that this Council should play a role in addressing these threats to international peace and security. To conclude, we once again reaffirm our principled position against all nuclear weapons and WMDs in outer space, on Earth, and anywhere. We stand ready to engage constructively on outer space discussions in all relevant fora, including the Security Council. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Malta for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Japan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me begin by reminding you of all of what our Russian colleague stated in this chamber just a few weeks ago. He stated in this chamber, quote, "The discussion of space security issues and the decisions taken should be comprehensive and should involve all the UN members. Otherwise, this is nothing but an obvious attempt to impose the opinion of UN Security Council members on the rest of the UN membership." End of quote. The same delegation now proposed a draft resolution on outer space security to this Council, which the rest of the UN membership would not accept. We cannot find consistency in their approach. Throughout the negotiation on this draft text, our delegation made its best efforts to find compromise by offering concrete proposals to converge the divergent views among the Council members. We regret that the penholder did not fully take into account such constructive suggestions and decided to put forward a text with a number of divisive elements. For example, on the prevention of arms race in outer space, while there is consensus to take further measures and appropriate international negotiations in accordance with the spirit of the Outer Space Treaty at this stage, there is no consensus among UN member states on a specific way forward. That is why the General Assembly and the Conference on Disarmament continue to discuss this important issue. Maintaining the peaceful nature of outer space is greatly relevant to the work of the Security Council. However, we believe the Council should complement the efforts made in other relevant fora rather than preempting or prejudging the result of such efforts. Japan reiterates its strong commitment to ensuring the security, stability, and sustainability of outer space and the objective of preventing an arms race in outer space. However, significant challenges remain in defining and verifying a weapon in outer space. This derives from the dual-use nature of space objects and technologies, as well as the need to address space threats in a comprehensive manner. In order to address security challenges in outer space, it is crucial to focus on how certain objects or capabilities are applied and used. Based on this position, we voted against on today's voting. Before concluding, there's another note I would like to emphasize. This draft resolution in OP7 calls upon UN member states not to develop nuclear weapons or any other kinds of WMD specifically designed to be placed in outer space. We are pleased to see that the proponents of this resolution are now ready to proactively commit to this important principle, which Japan and the United States wanted to deliver in our draft resolution presented last month. Outer space must never be an arena for a nuclear arms race. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Japan for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Switzerland.
Monsieur le Président.
President, ensuring the peaceful, safe and sustainable use of outer space contributes to our security and prosperity. It is in the common interest of all states. It is the responsibility not only of the dedicated bodies, but also of this Council to preserve space for future generations. Switzerland insists that the different approaches to space security are complementary. We remain committed to our position that it is imperative to prevent an arms race, as well as armed conflict in outer space. And to this end, the placement of all types of weapons, including conventional ones, should be prohibited. To achieve these objectives, we believe it is necessary to develop standards of responsible behaviour, as well as legally binding instruments. After negotiating the resolution put forward by Japan and the United States, which unfortunately failed due to a veto, and examining Russia's present draft, we believe that there would be enough common ground to reach a consensus. Although we support several elements of the draft presented, we regret that the spirit of flexibility and a framework of trust were lacking, and that our suggestions to produce a text that would unite us rather than divide us were not taken into account. We have therefore decided to abstain on this draft. Yet, this Council should act in a spirit of cooperation and make issues such as space security a ground for common understanding, rather than an arena of confrontation where everybody tries to score points. We regret that this was not the case this time, and hope that future opportunities will be seized to reconcile positions and reach common ground. Switzerland stresses that the implementation of the provisions of the Outer Space Treaty is mandatory for states parties, and we once again call on all states that have not yet done so to accede to it without delay. Switzerland remains convinced that it is necessary and possible to agree on a product in this Council on an issue as important for international security and the prosperity of each of our countries. We call on all members to unite and seek solutions, focusing on common ground rather than on differences, so as to achieve results that advance disarmament rather than deepening divisions. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Switzerland for their statement, and I'll give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. The United Kingdom is committed to preventing an arms race in outer space. That is why we introduced a resolution in the General Assembly last year establishing norms, rules and principles of responsible behaviour to reduce threats to space systems. It was adopted with the overwhelming support of 166 member states. And it is why the UK supported the US and Japan draft resolution in this Council, which sought to affirm the basic obligations of the Outer Space Treaty and prevent any nuclear weapons being placed in orbit around Earth. The detonation of a nuclear weapon in space could destroy or permanently damage a significant proportion of satellites in orbit around Earth, with highly disruptive and potentially life-threatening consequences for the essential space technology applications that we all rely on. It should be deeply concerning to all of us that Russia vetoed that resolution. Russia's counter-resolution that we voted on today was simply not credible. It was a cynical attempt to distract attention away from reports that Moscow is developing a new satellite carrying a nuclear device. The resolution was built around language that was voted down just a few weeks ago by this Council and was widely opposed again in negotiations. So why put it to a vote today? This was not a serious attempt to address the security of space, and Russia knows very well its proposals were not verifiable or enforceable. Coming from a country which has flouted so many obligations in arms control, this raises the red flag. Let me remind you of Russia's recent track record. Plans to withdraw ratification of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, withdrawal from Open Skies and the Comprehensive Forces in Europe treaties, suspending participation in New START, violating the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty and the Chemical Weapons Convention, and, of course, breaching this Council's resolutions on Iran and DPRK. Colleagues, we need to redouble efforts to avoid an arms race in outer space and to ensure our collective security. That requires serious, good faith discussion about the arms control architecture. We remain ready and willing to engage in those as a matter of urgency. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Mr. President, Guyana voted in favor of the draft resolution titled "The Prevention of an Arms Race in Outer Space and Outer Space Security" presented by the Russian Federation. We supported the draft resolution as it is consistent with our positions on General Assembly Resolution 78/238 and Draft Security Council Resolution S/2024/302, which was presented by Japan and the United States less than a month ago on the prevention of nuclear weapons in outer space, but unfortunately was not adopted due to Russia's veto. As a nation committed to the equitable and peaceful use of outer space, we recognize the importance of this draft resolution call for space to be free from all weapons. The prospect of weaponizing this domain poses a grave threat not only to global security, but also to the future of humanity's shared heritage in space. In this regard, we believe the draft text, which was not adopted, could have contributed to averting this grave threat. Guyana underscores that outer space must remain free of all weapons, including weapons of mass destruction. It is crucial that we safeguard this shared global common from the scourge of arms races, which can only exacerbate the threats to our collective security and hinder our development agendas. Mr. President, Guyana reiterates the importance of nuclear weapon states upholding their international obligations and committing to not place nuclear weapons in outer space. We also reiterate our commitment to supporting efforts that guarantee the right of all countries to benefit equitably from the peaceful use of outer space. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Ecuador.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you, President. Ecuador is firmly committed to promoting international peace and security and believes that regulating activities in outer space is one of the essential elements of the necessary architecture in order to guarantee its long-term sustainability. For this reason, faithful to our principles and coherent with our own position, my country voted in favour of the draft resolution. Ecuador recognises the importance of preserving outer space as a peaceful place and opposes anarchy in space and still more the militarization of space, which would include the placement of any kind of weapon, particularly weapons of mass destruction. there is no avoiding the fact that the basis of the text put to this Council's consideration was based on the draft which was vetoed on the 24th of April, including language from the amendment which did not receive the number of favourable votes for its adoption, meaning that a similar outcome was predictable. Why put this Council through a useless process when the result was already known? There is a worrisome and increasing polarisation, confrontation in considering matters within the mandate of this Council. Such matters confer upon its members an individual and collective responsibility to seek constructive solutions to face global challenges, including the questions of weapons in outer space. We must not politicise the Security Council and use it as just one more arena which exposes today's geopolitical tensions. To conclude, President, I reaffirm Ecuador's commitment to continue to act in accordance with the principles of the Charter of the United Nations upon the basis of dialogue and cooperation between its members. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Ecuador for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of France.
I thank you, President. France voted against the draft resolution tabled today. We deplore the obstructive methods used by Russia, who was clearly only seeking to divide the Council and place the responsibility for the failure of this draft text without really supporting its objectives. Today's vote reflects our refusal of the method. On the 24th of April, Russia vetoed the draft resolution on outer space, as prepared by the United States and Japan. We wish to once again to welcome and commend the efforts deployed by these two states during open discussions in order to achieve a compromise. Their draft reaffirmed the importance of the 1967 treaty, which is the basis of international space law, and it underlined the role of specialised bodies such as the Disarmament Conference in order to continue developing the legal framework which will be applicable to space. After having alone blocked the adoption of this text, Russia put to the Council an alternative draft with 15 paragraphs which came directly from the proposal of the United States and Japan. It is astonishing that Russia vetoed something which it used then as an inspiration for its own draft. France's position is clear. We support those paragraphs which recall the role of the 1967 treaty, but Russia is seeking to impose new provisions which distance the Council from any agreement. These additions aim to bring in references to the draft treaty on the placement of weapons in outer space, which does not enjoy consensus and is being discussed in disarmament bodies. France has reservations about this draft treaty, which would have problems with definition of terms and establishing effective verification mechanisms. During negotiations on this draft resolution, we have, like many other members of the Council, called not to pre-guess the current dates happening in disarmament institutions. By way of compromise, we accepted the draft not mentioning the threats of space in definitions of norms for responsible behaviour, although 70 states had supported resolutions promoting such an approach in the First Committee of the General Assembly. For its part, Russia persisted in wanting to bring into the text the proposal for a treaty when it knew that a majority of the members of the Council did not support this. It is this refusal to negotiate and the veto which it used a few weeks ago which allows us to cast doubt on the credibility of Russia when it claims to bring together the international community in negotiating an agreement on the prevention of an arms race in outer space. President, it is in the interests of all of us for outer space to remain safe and stable and to be used for peaceful ends. France is attached to the respect for the 1967 treaty, international law, and the prevention of an arms race in outer space. In order to move towards this aim, we are mobilised in discussions in the competent bodies on disarmament, including the definition of political commitments and appropriate binding instruments. I thank you.
I thank the representative of France for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Mr. President, Sierra Leone reaffirms its commitment to promoting peace, security, and stability in outer space and beyond. In line with our principal stance on preventing the weaponization of outer space, Sierra Leone voted on 24th April 2024 in favor of the previous draft resolution, which was sponsored by Japan and the US and co-sponsored by 65 member states on weapons of mass destruction in outer space, which was not adopted owing to a non-concurring vote of a permanent member. We also voted for the amendment proposed by the Russian Federation and China, recognizing the urgent need for measures to prevent the placement of weapons in outer space. Sierra Leone has voted in favor of this draft resolution S/2024/383 to re-echo our consistent and fundamental belief in the peaceful uses of outer space and prevent any potential militarization. We observe that the draft resolution sponsored by the Russian Federation largely comprises elements of the draft Security Council resolution co-authored by Japan and the US, which was not adopted. We recognize the concerns of some Security Council members regarding a lack of broad consensus on broad elements of the draft. However, the urgency of preventing any militarization of outer space necessitates strong and decisive measures. Sierra Leone family believes that the adoption of any resolution would call for the prevention of an arms race in outer space is a pivotal step towards mitigating the risk. In conclusion, Sierra Leone remains dedicated to the pursuit of peace and security in outer space. Our vote in favor of the draft resolution signifies our commitment to maintaining outer space as a sanctuary for peaceful activities, free from threats, military confrontation, and conflict prevalent on Earth, a realm where humanity can unify in the pursuit of knowledge, exploration, and mutual advancement. We call upon all member states to collaborate earnestly in future negotiations in the Conference on Disarmament to develop a universally accepted, legally binding framework that will safeguard our shared outer space heritage for the betterment of present and future generations. Sierra Leone stands ready to continue its constructive engagement in these vital discussions to ensure that outer space remains a secure and peaceful environment for present and future generations. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Slovenia regrets to see another divisive vote on a topic that should unite us. Slovenia engaged in good faith, with openness and flexibility, in the negotiations of this resolution, with the aim to ensure a safe and secure space environment. We proposed a number of amendments, however, none of our concerns were taken on board. We underlined that the international space law, with the Outer Space Treaty at its center, represents the cornerstone of the global governance of outer space. They include central provisions on the prevention of an arms race in outer space, with the prohibition of placement of weapons of mass destruction above Earth's atmosphere. These obligations need to be reiterated and strengthened in order to avoid potentially harmful interference with the peaceful exploration and use of outer space. Mr. President, Slovenia supports the majority of the submitted text. However, the proposal put forward by the Russian Federation does not effectively address the many challenges associated with the prevention of an arms race in outer space, and would, in our view, have ambiguous implications for the security of outer space. And for these reasons, we voted against this resolution. That being said, Slovenia remains steadfast in its commitment to the prevention of an arms race in outer space. It supports strengthening of existing commitments through norms, rules and principles of responsible behavior, as well as legally binding measures. We reaffirm our dedication to engaging constructively in all efforts aimed at ensuring the peaceful use of outer space for the benefit of present and future generations. We urge all spacefaring nations to exercise restraint and refrain from actions that could lead to weaponization of outer space. We appeal to them to demonstrate responsible behavior in order to secure a peaceful and sustainable use of outer space. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for their statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Mr. President, we We, on the whole, are pleased with the results of the vote. Beyond the figures, the vote has demonstrated a watershed between those who are striving towards peaceful use of outer space and those who are moving towards militarization of outer space. Western countries have today essentially turned out to be isolated at the Security Council. And this is symptomatic. We deeply regret the fact that these Western countries, the members of the Security Council, today did not allow the Security Council to adopt a balanced and so necessary resolution today to keep outer space exclusively for peaceful purposes. In this way today, they have definitively cast aside their masks. They have unmasked themselves, and they have presented themselves as they truly are today before us. Just last month, the United States and their allies, with their inherent cynicism, were beating their chests, loudly proclaiming their commitments to peaceful outer space. And today, after they confirmed and showed their real intention to continue to militarize outer space and to continue to develop the relevant weapons, what is particularly cynical and hypocritical are their attempts to justify their actions with the allegedly non-consensual nature of our draft. Not to mention the sudden awakening of their recognition of the importance of discussing the question of preventing an arms race in outer space at specialized disarmament fora. For this is the position which they criticized Russia for just a few weeks ago. And today, this is something which the Japanese representative tried to then put the ball in our court. However, we all recall that you, ladies and gentlemen, placed this subject on the agenda of the Council, and the reason for which you did not support a draft today is banal and very simple. You simply wish to maintain your leeway to use outer space for military purposes and to place there in outer space any forms of weapons. The so-called explanation from the U.S. representative before the vote, I do apologize, but it is laughable, and it does not withstand any criticism. He failed to respond to the main question. The United States wanted to prevent the placement of weapons of mass destruction in outer space. That is included in our text, and it was replicated. It was taken from your draft resolution, that of the United States and Japan. Please explain, why can you not accept a prohibition on the placement of all other forms of weapons in outer space? And as for the rest of you, please, for the rest of you who voted against our draft, essentially, you didn't have anything to add to the conversation today. Distinguished colleagues, we call upon all of you to consider the consequences that residents of Earth would face in the event of militarization of outer space. And the likelihood, the probability of this scenario, as the United States once again and allies once again demonstrated, is unfortunately the likelihood of this is becoming all the more real. We do not conceal that the conduct by Western countries of active militarization and exploration of space is something which is of deep concern to us. Suffice it to read the regularly published reports from their specialized agencies. And these reports name these actions and call them self-defense. And they are underpinned with generous premises. And at the same time, nobody other than the United States and their allies proclaimed outer space a theater for military action, nor they're placing their offensive combat systems and military systems there. Today, we have heard from Western countries a great deal of hypocritical words and characterizing both the draft resolution as well as our intentions, as well as blatant lies about the working methods methods of work on the draft resolution, where we held consultations, we gathered written comments, and we repeatedly extended silence at the request of delegations. At the same time, through today's vote was a defeat for all of those who, like the Russian Federation, are trying to avoid a confrontation leading to a conflict in near space orbit. Of course, the situation which has unfolded will require analysis and steps undertaken by our side. At the same time, the Russian Federation will remain committed to our obligations in outer space pursuant to international law. And incidentally, this is something which the U.S. representative rightly referred to. We repeatedly reaffirmed and continue to reaffirm our obligations. Despite the aggressive stance of the U.S. and allies, we will continue to work proactively along these lines, and we will spare no effort alongside relevant UN member states to keep space peaceful. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Russian Federation for their